All right, guys, part two. So you'll notice I turned the gain up a bit. Hopefully, you should be able to hear me a little bit better. Um, First thing you need to do is setting a target. You need a target that makes sense. Target I would like you guys to think about is sustainable performance. So I don't want you to be good this semester. I want you to be good through your entire university degree. I don't want you to be good just at my subject. I want you to be good at my subject. I want you to be good at all your subjects. Short-term retention is a really shitty target. What I mean by that is if what you're trying to do is study just enough to pass the test in the night before, that's going to put things in your short-term memory. You may get past the test. You're going to retain nothing of this knowledge into the future. What was the point of doing the damn subject? 100% is also a bad target. People who get obsessed with 100% are worrying about the wrong thing. Okay? The course is meant to be challenging. What my goal for you guys is to get better during the course. I want you to take the feedback from assessments. I want you to take the knowledge from the lectures. I want you to get better during the course. That's what I would like to see from you. 100% is not my target for you. Is it possible? Yeah, sure. We got a student last year got 101.3%. Not sure how they did it, but they got 101.3%. It's possible. It's a bad target. I don't want you studying this subject for 18 hours and the rest of your 3 subjects for 2 hours because you love this subject so much more because it's so much cooler. I get that it's cooler. It's a bad target. The target that you should consider is sustainable performance. Now, for some of you, that's going to be different. This is your last unit. You're working 3 jobs. You just want to pass so you can finish your degree. For other ones of you guys, you want above 90% because you're trying to get into med school or vet school. That's fine as long as you understand your target. All right, so basics of study are really simple. First trick is to make the notes before you go to class. This sounds really dumb. If you make the notes from the slides I put up before you actually watch this lecture, you're going to make the math work for you. What I mean by that is typically you've got 2 to 3 hours of lectures a week for most subjects, and then you might study for 3 hours a week, 2 hours a week. If you do the study first, you'll understand 80% of the content before you get to the lecture. Then when you're in the lecture, only 20% of it is going to be really challenging. So for these kind of lectures, pay really close attention when I'm talking to that 20%. If we're in the same room, or if we're doing a revision lecture, or if back next semester when we're back in class, that's the 20% you want to ask questions on. That means you've got 3 hours of study a week with your lecturer as opposed to 2 hours of study a week by yourself. Way better. Next one is to write notes based on lectures or the readings, depending on what I give you. And for most subjects, lectures and readings are the big things, right? Now, writing is better than typing. I realize a bunch of you guys like to type because you have terrible handwriting. I have terrible handwriting. As long as you can read it, it doesn't matter. Writing is going to help you to remember, particularly if your final exam is a written exam. If I was getting you to type your final exam, then typing is the way to go. But because we're writing, you want to repeat the same action. That's the way your brain learns best. So you write your notes and you write your lectures. The next thing you want to do after you have notes that you've written before you went to class and you've asked questions on in class so you can clarify, you want to spend time revising those notes. Either cut them down to a smaller set of notes or go through and highlight them, or do both. And then you want to do practice exercises. So if you can practice an assessment, you're going to have a much better understanding of what's in the assessment, of how to do well in the assessment, of where the tricks might be for that particular assessment. So it's a good idea to practice test questions and to practice essays if you can do both. Again, for your study environment, desk, much better than a bed or a couch. Those two do things to your posture that makes it hard for you to remember stuff. You want natural light. It's much better than artificial light. You want actual airflow. I know that's tricky in Canada where there is no air because the air is always trying to kill you because it's that cold. So do what you can. Generally, you want focus time and then breaks where you do something else. So studying for 6-hour block is not as effective as 2-hour block or an hour block, 15 minutes off, hour block. I tend to study with about 2 hours and about a half an hour block of time off to do something completely different. What we're doing is fractionation. We're changing your focus so that when you come back to it, you'll learn it again and the knowledge will sink deeper in. You'll be more easily able to use it. Okay, these are the things that do work. Things that don't work are also pretty simple. Don't study in your bed. Doesn't work. Just go to sleep. Don't read textbooks. That is a very inefficient way to study. Take notes on the textbook. Don't just read it. And studying while on your phone, while on social media, is not studying. So put your phone somewhere else so you can't access it, especially when you get the ding notifications. Those are going to break your chain of thought. It's going to take you on average 7 minutes to get back into what you were studying at the same depth as before the ding. Every time your phone dings, 7 minutes study time lost. While you're studying, put your phone on silent, get it away from you. When it's time to take a break, please update your Instagram accounts and TikToks. Am studying, am awesome, will pass test. Hashtag. There are many ways to learn things. It actually depends on what kind of learner you are, and there's a few different learning intelligences. You can do little tests online to figure out which one you have. I don't care which one you have. I want you to find which one you have. I want you to use that most effectively. You need to know how you learn things. You need to build, some of you will need to build concept maps, big diagrams. Some of you will need to write things down or draw things or talk to yourself. Some of you will need to develop an explanation. It's often a good idea to draw diagrams. Whichever way works for you, and for most of you, 2 of those ways will work pretty well for you. Then you want to practice assessment style questions. I'm going to put some up later in the semester just so you can see what the exams are going to look like. You want to figure out your study sessions. Do you want to do several small study sessions a week for each subject? Do you want to dedicate a day or 2 to each subject a week and study on that day? So try different methods of that and figure out what works for you. Generally, they say 45 minutes on, 10 minutes off. I find 2 hours on, half an hour off is better for me, but do whatever you like. And I find that I work better if I study one subject at a time so that I can really get my head into it. But again, try some of these things. You'll find very quickly which works better for you. This next slide is just from what I have seen in the last couple of years. You guys are very smart people, but smart people often do stupid things. So, if you should be registered with support services and you are not registered with support services, go do that. My assessments are designed to test you at your best. They are not designed to test you when your health is not good, when there's something stressing you out that's not university, when you've just crashed your car. I've had people walk into an exam literally bleeding from a car accident and think that I'm going to get them to do the exam. Don't do that, that's dumb. If something goes terribly wrong, let people know. We can be flexible if we know early. The other really dumb thing that really smart people do is they don't ask for help from classmates or their instructors. So this is for everybody who's watching this lecture and the people who aren't watching this lecture, who have sent in no questions, have put no questions on the Q&A board, and haven't talked to any of their classmates. If that's your strategy, that's okay if you're going to get 100% in all the exams. Because the only reason you shouldn't need help is because everything is absolutely easy for you. And that's fine, it just means I need to make the course harder. Otherwise, you're just making your life more difficult for absolutely no reason. Talk to your instructors, talk to your classmates. Get help. Right, so lots of people like to play university on the hardest difficulty. Like it was a video game, they want to sit it to the hardest setting. I don't do that. I don't do it for many things. I think for university, the aim is to finish. The aim is not to play on difficult. For your job, the aim is to have a fulfilling career that pays you well. It's not to get that career in the hardest way possible. So there are some things that make it harder for you than most people do. A lot of people only study alone. It's not effective because if you make a mistake, you won't be able to pick it up. Also, it's not a lot of fun to study by yourself. Learn to study with groups of people. Secondly, most of you guys don't find ways to contact and talk to people in senior years of the same course. So that's really dumb. The guys who've already done this course and all the courses this year can tell you how hard it is, can tell you what kinds of things you're going to need to know for the assessments. I don't have the same assessment, but I certainly assess in the same ways and the same skills. They can tell you which subjects are difficult in the years coming up and how best to prepare for them. That's important. That makes your life easier. Most common thing though that people do wrong is they don't get feedback and they don't use feedback. So typically if I give you an assignment back, I give it to like 100 people. About 80% of people fold it, put it in their bag, don't look at anything except for the mark on the top. About 15% of people curse me out. And only 5% of people actually read the comments. Usually 2 or 3 will come and see me. Those 2 or 3 get better the fastest. A couple of years ago, I had a kid in a master's course who got 20% on his first assessment, then spent an hour with me finding out exactly what he did wrong on his assessment. And that wasn't fun for him, right? Because 20% is a terrible mark. And there was lots of things that were not okay in what he was doing. But in the next assessment, he got 70%. In the one after that, he got 85%. That's how you get better. Now, there's a trick to this. There's 3 questions that you should be asking. What do I need to improve? What did I do wrong? What did I screw up? Secondly, what did I do well? And this is the one nobody ever asks. There are many ways to break something. So if I just tell you what you did wrong, you're probably just going to break it in a different way. I need to not only tell you what you did wrong, I need to tell you what you did well. And then always ask for an example. If you can have an example, it's going to work much, much better. Here's a really easy tip. If you hand in something to me and you're the only person that's read that thing, what you handed me was a draft. It wasn't an assessment, it was the draft of an assessment. If you're the only person who's read it, it's always a draft. Because your brain isn't that good at catching your mistakes. You already know what you mean. If you get somebody else to read your assignment and give you some feedback before you hand it in to me, generally your marks go up by at least 10%. That's 10% for literally no extra work. But people don't take that opportunity. These are easy marks, guys. I want you to be taking these marks. All right, so study hacking, which is a little bit like regular hacking. Switch up where you study. You want to study in different locations so that your brain doesn't become habituated to studying in one place where your test is not. Classical music. I don't love classical music, but classical music has been shown to increase your memory. So it increases your ability to retain information. There is also a really strong link between smell and memory. So if you have trouble remembering stuff, one of the tricks you can do, and this is super nerd stuff, but it works, so use it if you want, is to have a different smell for each of those subjects. So if you have lavender with you while you study biology, and then you have lavender with you in the test, that's going to help your memory. Obviously, sleep, food, and exercise are really important things to determine how well your brain is functioning at any given time. If you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, and if you haven't exercised, your brain isn't running at peak efficiency. Work with those things to get your brain working better. And lastly, repetition. You're going to need to repeat things in order to get good at them. So when we teach surgeons, we get them to repeat the same actions hundreds of times so they can do them in a trauma situation immediately. I want you guys to think about the same thing. How can I incorporate repetition into my study? How can I repeat questions or repeat tests or repeat looking over notes until I'm sure that I really understand them? Generally, I like to have spacing when I set up somebody's study pattern. So if they have a class, they want to review it 1 to 2 days after the class and then 1 week after that. That short-term review and then medium-term review, so that break between when you review it, tells your brain that this is important information that I should store somewhere I can get to again. So this is a way of hacking your brain. If you switch up your learning techniques, sometimes you use diagrams, sometimes you talk, sometimes you have pictures, sometimes you just have writing. That's another way to tell your brain that this is important information that it needs to store. One of the best ways to do this is to teach someone else. And that's really easy if you know people in your class and you're talking to them. If you can teach somebody, then you understand it. So I'm going to encourage you guys, try to find people to study with, try to teach them the topic. If you teach it to them correctly and they understood, you know you're doing well and you understand. You need to find ways to small chunk the knowledge. So I give you big lectures with lots of content. You need to find ways to break those up into manageable parts so that you can understand them. Then you need to set learning targets. Once you can do all of these things, you're going to have a really strong study pattern and a really productive way of learning information independently. And if you can do that, then you can get skilled in absolutely anything on the planet. This is a really valuable skill for you guys to learn. All right, so that is the end of the lecture. I'm going to cut it there. Again, guys, please keep sending in questions, keep using the forums, and I look forward to seeing you this week.